Hey, everybody. My name is Steve Hughes. I'm with the Working Families Party on the Membership Organizing and Radical Education team. Really happy you're joining us, and it's my pleasure today to introduce to you my colleague and comrade in this work of doing political education, Lexi Coburn, who has recently joined the Working Families Party team as the National Radical Education Field Manager. She comes to WFP having worked for other organizations, including Indivisible, and running the training work for the Warren campaign in North Carolina, where she is currently calling you from. So we're really happy that you're here, and I'm really happy to pass it over to Lexi to take us into this presentation on the parties we have. Go for it, Lexi.
Thanks so much, Steve, my comrade as well. And welcome, everyone. We're really, really glad to have you with us here today. And before we start, I just want to ask, where's everyone calling from today? It's cool to be virtual because we're all spread out. But where are you calling from? Let's see you in the chat. Type where you are calling from. I'll see your names. But like Steve said, I'm in North Carolina, Durham to be specific. So I love being in this nice little bubble here in the South. But where's everyone calling from? I'm gonna give you all just a moment to see where you're at. Don't be shy. Everyone else was shy. You know, to be completely honest with you, I used to be super shy too, so I totally understand. I got you. Whenever you want to talk in the chat, it's cool. We're here. So today we're going to be talking about the parts we have, like Steve said. Oh, Mercedes calling in from Texas. Hey, Mercedes. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the parties we have. And that, in other words, when we look at the political system in this country, it is generally described as a two-party system, either one or two. So for this short interactive session, we're going to unpack that a little bit. So let's talk about the goals for this session. First, we want to learn a bit about the diversity of the power players that exist within the two parties, or at least close to them. Second, we want to learn a little bit about the interests of those power players and what they do to advance those interests. Finally, we want to develop a multifaceted understanding of political power. And what does that mean, Lexi? True. Well, we want to look at how power is more than just people or money. And as important as those things are, it is also about controlling political infrastructure and shaping how people think. So let's dig a little deeper on that idea of developing a multifaceted understanding of power. So I would love to see in the chat some ideas around what gives a person or an organization political power. If you have ideas, throw them in the chat. I'm happy to keep reading as they come in. If we move forward, that's cool. But let's see, just pause for a second and see some answers about what gives a person or an organization political power. So some of the answers that I have about what gives a person or organization political power is the ability to win votes, or at least to be able to deliver them for someone else, like an electoral organizer. And this is where really the rubber hits the road when it comes to measuring political power. Now, in our country, the ability to win votes is often closely associated with money, either having your own or being able to raise large amounts of it. But of course, there is way more to votes and money than what we're talking about here. Another way that people and organizations gain political power is by controlling political infrastructure. And that might mean controlling the levers of power inside one of the parties or inside of Congress itself. And this kind of power lets you put things on the political agenda, and it also lets you keep things off the agenda. One person in our previous session mentioned Joe Manchin, which is a really, really great example of what I had just said about that kind of power inside of Congress and the way that it's controlled, that infrastructure. Finally, political power also makes itself visible in terms of the ability to shape ideas and the way that people think about the big issues of the day. And some might say that this is the ability to shape what the general public considers to be common sense at any given time. So, what if we were to draw a picture of what political power in the United States looks like? What might we draw? We will definitely draw this picture here. This is what we drew. And it is a picture of the modern Republican and Democratic parties. Now, we're not going to go into this in great detail right now, but this picture shows some of the forces, just some of the forces that live in these two parties. Now, we have everything from elected officials to former party organizations to the media to voting constituencies like white evangelicals for Republicans and affluent liberals for the Democrats. We have donors, and we also have advocacy movement organizations. Every single piece is a power piece on this map. Now, this is actually called a power map, and is a tool that organizers often use to assess the power in their communities and to plan their organizing campaigns. So as you can see, it's set up as a grid, as it should. Along the bottom, on the horizontal axis, we show how aligned various power players in our political system are with us. So on the left side, let's say that we have people here that believe that we should abolish all billionaires, which, yes, if I was a person, I'd be on the left side because I also believe that this is the way that works. Now, on the right side, we have power players who believe that what's good for billionaires is good for all of us. I'm not over there, but there are some people who are over there, and that's cool. Does everyone understand that? On the vertical axis, we see how much power these groups have. So closer to the top, you're going to have it's going to be more powerful. Those are the more powerful people, and closer to the bottom, the less the powerful. Do we see how this axis is? I think I just like to dance. We could argue where any of these groups on this map should be, and for now, let's not quibble about those details. What we really want you to do is take a look at this as the broader patterns on the map. Now, we're going to go ahead and look at three larger groupings on the map. Kind of bring this in a little bit. So the first grouping in the upper right-hand corner is the Republican Party. It's in red. This is how we traditionally spot Republicanism. We would argue that regardless of any particular election outcomes right now, the Republican Party is quite powerful in terms of having well-organized infrastructure and a clear, consistent worldview. Doesn't change that often. Now, the next grouping here in the middle, this is what we would refer to in shorthand as the party establishment of the Democrats. Now, these are the big donors, the bulk of the elected officials, consultants, and also voting blocs like affluent liberals. This is where they live. And the final group here, this is where we live. This is where movement organizations and left-wing elected officials live. And it's also where multiracial working class lives. This is where that voting bloc and that general constituency lives. So there's a couple of things, if I'm looking at this, there's a couple of things that I notice. And the first thing that I notice is that there is some overlap between the circles. And it should be, because we're not talking about solid boundaries, just simply groups that tend to cluster together in terms of ideology and the power to enact that ideology. That's why you see those circles, and that's why it intersects with the circle in the middle of the Democratic Party, the party establishment. That makes sense. The other thing that's really obvious to me looking at this power map is that our folks don't have a lot of power. And this is talking about that green bubble. That's us, and we don't have a lot of power. This is true compared to Republicans as well, but it's also true compared to the forces that make up the establishment of the Democratic Party. Now, so we have another power map. This is like my favorite one. And we want to go ahead and use this to get concrete about all of this stuff so you can really visualize what we're talking about. We're going to make our own effort to place onto this map several real power players. Real life power players. There it is. If we had more time, we would map out both the Democrats and Republicans, but for now we're going to focus just on the Democrats because they're a more complex situation in terms of our understanding of how political power is distributed. So let's look at someone that we all know. Super familiar. This is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as she's affectionately called. As you can see on the slide, we're laying out two things. We're laying out what her interests are, and some of her interests here are policies that favor the many, not the few, which sounds familiar, building power to make that possible, and changing the narrative to make that common sense. These are the interests that Representative Ocasio-Cortez holds. And what we're also laying out here are the means. And these are the means that she has to achieve those interests that she has as well. So for example, AOC's interest is pursuing policies for the many, not the few. But in terms of her means, she has a huge social media following at her disposal to achieve those interests. If her interest is policies that favor the many, not the few, she also goes on TikTok and Twitter and talks to millennials like myself about these policies so that we can bridge these gaps. She does good work. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go through and we're going to look at different interests and different means for different people. And then we're going to see where others who have done this presentation before has put these people on the map, on the power map. So as you see here, there's a blank power map, and I'm going to ask that we show where AOC lands on this power map here. Now, she lands here. I'm going to explain the axis and where this is going right now. So remember, as we said before, the horizontal axis is how aligned the person is to us at the Working Families Party. So as you can see here, AOC is left aligned. She's not full left, but she's pretty left, which means that she has active support. She's with us. She understands. She's right here. That's great. So then we look at the vertical axis. You see how powerful she is and how powerful she isn't, right? And this is where also people who have done this before, where this lies, where they thought AOC lies. And as a semi-new-ish person in Congress, a congresswoman herself, she lands pretty powerful on the spectrum. This is an 8 out of 10. It's pretty high. And it's because of the way that she utilizes her means to get to her interests. She holds a good amount of power there. So is everyone with me so far? So this is definitely where we think AOC is aligned with us. And definitely, if you agree with this, let's see it in the chat. If you don't agree with it, let's see that in the chat too. This is always an open discussion on where people think that power players land on a power map. But it's all to really exemplify and dig into how these systems unfold in our political two-party system here. What needs to change and what needs to change for the better and what needs to be abolished. Give me a moment to see if I have some agrees or non-agrees. Non-agrees may not be a word, but we're just going to keep going. Okay, cool. That's totally cool too. I'm going to take all that as, yes, girl, you got it, and heard. Let's go to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, this is a person who has multiple interests, electing Democrats so they are in the majority. She also tends to believe that the best way to do this is to run moderates who can self-fund in swing districts, and for the Democratic Party to avoid getting a reputation as being too liberal. She also wants to pass policy that she has championed throughout her career: rights for women, LGBTQIA+, expanded healthcare access and pro-environmental legislation. She does this throughout her very long career. And also she wants to support her home state. She wants to support her home state, including the tech business in California, which makes perfect sense. So what are her means? How does she execute these things? This is access to donors. This is control over the infrastructure of Congress itself, committee assignments and things like that. That's her, I think that we understand generally that if you're in charge of a committee assignment, you hold a good amount of power. And this power also gives you the avenue to have control over the agenda. Remember, as we said in the beginning, sometimes if you manipulate power in a certain way, you'll have power over how things in Congress unfold. And also some of the means that she exerts are to control over important parts of the infrastructure of the Democratic Party, especially the D-TRIP. We call the D-TRIP is Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and the House Majority Super PAC. She has a lot of means that she's able to exert this power over in order to serve her interest. And also, of course, fundraising for the groups advancing Black liberation. These are all the means in order to execute these interests and really bring these interests to life. So, knowing all this, where does she fall on the power map? Let's go ahead and see that. All right, so Nancy falls higher on the power spectrum. In fact, just about one of the most powerful people that we'll put up here. And also, she lands really centralized. And that makes a ton of sense. Most of her means and her interests are rather in the middle of ideology of the Democratic Party. So it makes perfect sense that she is here in the middle. Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here. Service Employees International Union. This is SEIU, as it is shortened, a labor union representing 1.8 million workers. This is also their interests, advancing the interests of the workers they represent, especially higher wages, better benefits, and more advanced working conditions. And also they want to grow their membership. The means in which they try to get to their interests is a large and diverse active membership, engaging in collective bargaining, lobbying in elections. They are very present and becoming even more present in electoral campaigns, and not just like presidential campaigns, but also like Senate races, governor races. They do exert influences on these levels as well. They also donate to candidates and spend money on general voter mobilization. Once again, we're exerting influence and power through other means. And then also, they use political power to create more favorable conditions for organizing workers. So knowing that a lot of their base influences are serving others, where do they fall in the power map? Let's see it. So you're going to notice a trend. You're going to start noticing that organizations are going to fall pretty low on the power, but more aligned to us. SEIU falls a little further down than AOC in terms of power. They're kind of like centralized in that power stage, but they are also more left aligned. So what that means is that SEIU is way more likely to agree with us than Nancy Pelosi will, but we're kind of gonna go over here to the AOC party because we know for sure that she's aligned with us. There really could be not too much of a question there. All right, so we have next on our docket, we have the Movement for Black Lives, one of the grassroots organizations that we will examine here. It's a network of dozens of local and national organizations committed to Black liberation. Thank you. Their interest, their almost singular interest, is translating the eruption of protests over police killings of Black people into a durable movement for social transformation. Pretty, clean cut there. And the way they do this, their means, high visibility mobilization, training and political education, coalition building among Black organizations and with other left forces, fundraising for groups advancing Black liberation, and the vision of Black Lives Policy platform. When you read through these means really heavily align with the Working Families Party. But let's actually see where they land on the power map. The Movement for Black Lives is going to be one of those organizations, one of these entities that are more aligned with us than most things, than most other people or organizations. And that's good. You're going to want to have people who are aligned with you so that you have a trust there. And that's how you're able to exert even more power. If you're aligned with me, then you're with me, and then you're going to keep walking with me. And that's exactly what we want. So, but also, as you can see there, the Movement for Black Lives, we're getting further and further away from the center where Nancy Pelosi is. But let's see how that's about to change. So then we have David Plouffe. David Plouffe is a political consultant. I've met him a couple of times. This is a consultant who believes as politics as business, becoming rich by electing Democrats. Yeah, that's his main interest, and that's where he stands in that. He's going to be visible on a lot of establishment electoral campaigns and influencing a lot of the way that campaigns hit the ground in terms of their electoral work. So, definitely understand that going into looking at other campaigns and how they're operating. David Plouffe has many, many means of trying to get to his interests. Plouffe's been a political consultant, a corporate lobbyist, and a nonprofit leader. He is the one that also managed Obama's 2008 campaign. And as a consultant, he made more money the more expensive campaigns were, because campaigns have steadily been increasing since 2008. It has nothing to do with Obama, but it just has been over the years. In fact, North Carolina is a state that we have some of the most expensive Senate campaigns in recent history, and Democrats lost both times. Campaigns that can afford to pay consultants lots of money usually raise that money from the other wealthy and powerful. And because of his relationships and his record of advising politicians in a pro-corporate direction, he was rewarded with a Silicon Valley corporate lobbying job, a nice little setup. And from there, a multi-billion-dollar foundation that advocates for pro-tech industry solutions to social problems. So, he was able to do this type of work, organizing in his way via consulting, in order to kind of build a little bit more of an empire that branches out further. Let's see where he lands, because I have a thought. I think that he lands exactly near Nancy Pelosi. If you remember Nancy Pelosi's interests and her means of executing those interests, they really do align. So it makes perfect sense that they're pretty aligned with each other. Does David Plouffe have as much power as Nancy Pelosi? No. But they are aligned, which means that Nancy's going to have him on his team, and for all intents and purposes is on their team. All right, let's see the next one here. Center for American Progress. The current president of this nonprofit is Neera Tanden. This is a liberal think tank and advocacy organization. Their interest is serving as the main policy generator for the National Democratic Party, generally advancing policies that will align with what powerful figures in the party will help elect Democrats to keep them popular when they're in power. So just to liquidate that down, Center for American Progress sees the trends, creates policies that keep on those trends, and more importantly, puts those policies in a certain position so that Democrats can keep getting elected and keep staying in power. As you can see, there's a big component of that that's not listed, which is, what do the people want? The means of how CAP, as it's called, tries to get to their interests is generating policy ideas and proposals through research, some of which shapes broader narratives. They also control what policies then pursue through their relationship with powerful figures in the Democratic Party, such as Nancy Pelosi. Basically the factory where the governing program of the Democratic Party gets produced. And CAP was founded by John Podesta, former Bill Clinton chief of staff, Obama senior advisor, and Hillary Clinton campaign chair. And Tandon was also Clinton's policy director. So as you see, these are like the Hollywood sign stars of these party establishments. And they're all kind of getting together here at CAP to influence and push these policies onto the Democratic Party, really branding what the party is about. And they're successful in that. Let's see where CAP lands. CAP is very aligned with the party establishment here, a little further down on the power spectrum, but above David Plouffe, who is just one of the consultants in like just this general cluster of consultants that are for the Democratic Party, coming out of establishment politics. All right. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We're talking about African American voters. Hi. This is less than 12% of the presidential electorate. So African American voters, please, we know to be true, the African American voters are not a monolith. You're going to see some variation here. But generally, the interest of African American voters is seeing government advance policy that helps people meet their needs. It's pretty clear cut. The means of which is African Americans are the most reliable voting bloc in the United States. We've heard this time and time again over the last 4 to 6 years of the electoral cycle. Electing African Americans and allies to office and perhaps the Democratic Party congressional leadership where they can use infrastructure to advance policy. And also their means is through social movements, social media. Black Americans have shaped narratives in extremely important ways. We wouldn't have the Movement for Black Lives had African American voters not stood up and demanded change. We wouldn't be this far. Imagine what a power map would look like had it not been for African Americans really exerting their displeasure and desire for different policy and different change. I would imagine that Nancy Pelosi and CAP and David Plouffe would be a lot further right. But the work of African American voters and people who align with African American voters have been pushing establishment party politics left. How far left is also, of course, under speculation. But let's see where African American voters fall on this power map. When we were describing the interest and the interest and the means of African American voters, it really did seem like African American voters exert a lot of power and influence. But look at where they are on the power spectrum. They're pretty low. They're not too powerful. We are not that powerful. We are that powerful. But in terms of this map, the way that we are exerting political influence that equates into power is pretty low in comparison to the rest of the people on this power map. There's lots of reasons why this happens, but also look at how closely aligned African American voters is to the Working Families Party. That is a big piece and really a really foundational piece as well. So let's see who else we have here. Oh, highly educated voters. As we saw in the other power map where you have an overlap, you can absolutely be we don't have solid relationships here. There's no solid boundaries. You can absolutely be an African American voter and also a highly educated voter. Those two things can be true at the same time. But for this, highly educated voters are less than 10% of the presidential electorate. Their interests include leaning progressive, in part because this group includes lots of people in the public service industry, like teachers and nurses. And also some of their interests is education that also correlates closely with income and more affluent professionals who don't want to pay high taxes and want to send their kids to exclusive schools, so on and so forth. The means in which they try to execute these interests and to make sure these interests come to life Since this group is trending toward Democrats, it is a major place for Dems to pick up new votes, and therefore Democrats are eager to respond to their concerns. And just because we're not like identifying Republicans doesn't mean that Republicans don't also have that same energy to, get votes from highly educated voters. If you look at exit polls, that actually has been happening. This group also isn't necessarily giving millions, but they can give some money, and that's a good way to get listened to. These are also people that you'll see on like volunteering on electoral campaigns, volunteers exerting influence inside of other nonprofit spaces. Like highly educated voters are around. And lastly, people in the media, like in think tanks like CAP, tend to be members of this group and see the world through the same lens. So because you see the same lens, and then we're talking about think tanks and kind of like establishment politics, where do you think they land? Let's see where they do. Boom. As you can see here, there's a trend between voting blocks and like think tanks and like British elected officials, where think tanks and elected officials, consultants, are going to be much higher on a power axis than these voting blocks are. And like we have to think about why that is. But for now, highly educated voters are really centralized, but they're lowly centralized. They are not that aligned with us, but there could be some movement here. It's not like clear to the left. It's not clear to the right, but it is in a certain place where we may not appeal to highly educated voters, but we can get like one or two. Hey, that's a win too. So let's see who else is up here. Michael Bloomberg. I think we all know who Michael Bloomberg is. Former Republican/independent mayor of New York, 2020 presidential candidate. Michael Bloomberg's interest, other than having just a conglomerate of an organization, action on climate change, but also a very pro-corporate kind of climate change that does exist. Gun control and gay rights, and also his interest in minimal regulation on corporations, especially Wall Street. He made his fortune by engineering a kind of computer that every bank in the world uses. So this is just corporate. It's corporate. It's very just, once again, corporate. The means is that Bloomberg is worth $55 billion, which makes him the 8th richest individual in the United States. And in 2018, he spent almost $100 million helping to elect Democrats. And also, like I said before, Bloomberg owns a media empire, and he funds all sorts of organizations that loudly echo his view on the world. This is someone who's going to hold a lot of power, not just because of who he is, it's because of what he possesses, which is money. And that money will turn into influence like that. So he also has influence because he owns a media empire. We're going to talk about media later, but he owns it. He owns one of them. So just imagine how high he's going to be on the power map. Let's see where he is. Michael Bloomberg is on an island of power and influence and control all on his own. It's Seychelles. It's like the federated states of Micronesia over here. He's over there. He's in two different worlds from where African American voters live, this multiracial working class block of voters. We're over here on the left, and Michael Bloomberg is probably the most right person we're going to have on this Democratic slide. And that's just because of all the money and all the power that he harnesses. And yes, he does use money for Democratic campaigns, but if we're looking at where he is and how close he is to like CAP and Nancy Pelosi and David PLOUFFE, even though he's helping to elect Democrats, he's not taking a lot of notes from the party establishment. So imagine how that power gets kind of like changed for his doing. Then you start to understand how policy unfolds within the Democratic Party as well. Who gets elected, who gets support to try to get elected. Speaking of media, we have MSNBC up here too, Democratic-leaning cable news network. Highly educated voters, this is their jam. Watching Rachel Maddow at 9 p.m. is like an event. This is what they do. And we have like this kind of home base of a cable news network for all things liberal-leaning. Interest is a for-profit media outlet, and it makes money by selling advertising. So its interest is getting people to watch. like almost any media network. Where does MSNBC fall on this power map? Let's see it. Yeah, that sounds right. It's gonna land somewhere in the middle. All right, cool. I think that is the last one here. So thank you all so much for just sitting with me as I talk through the power map and see where these powerful players land. And like I said, for time reasons, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it for Republicans, but believe me, there's even more illuminating things to be had when we map out power structures within the Republican Party. Well, let's go ahead and start talking back to this power grid map. Now, when we look at this map, we see this is how power is distributed. Now, on a map like this, power acts as a center of gravity. It pulls objects toward it, and it creates clusters. And if you look at clusters, I've noticed a couple of things. I noticed that we are sharing a Democratic Party with some powerful forces that are not that aligned with us. We don't really talk to them, but we share space with them. So the Working Families Party, we like to say that we are renting a room in the Democratic Party, but we definitely don't own the house. We just live here, girl. I don't know what they're doing over there, but we just live here. This is our space. Our task at the Working Families Party is to build a political home all of our own. A political home for the multiracial working class, and a political home for the many, not the few. So now that we got to this part of our presentation, we have some really important business to attend to. The Working Families Party is investing our election work in communities that normally get cut off the electoral map. We're investing in the South, where I live, where we definitely need some more infrastructure and some investment. And we are investing in building people power in local races across the country, creating real change in people's communities, and building a political home that we can call our own. And taking that long view, we know that we need to invest in turning our movement to demands into electoral common sense. And we will continue to ensure that our demands to defund the police become an irresistible force at the ballot box. Because we have not overcome all the resistance to the Green New Deal or to capping CEO salaries. There's so much work to still do. But we also have come so far. Because this is the organizing work ahead of us. And it's not always going to be fought on the presidential stage, as it should not. Our work is to win 1,000 campaigns, battles all at once across the country. So, with all that being said, are you down to join me in this work? You should be. It's really fun over here because we envision a political party that is 100% pushed by our social movements and funded by our base, so that we are free to show up for our communities without anyone telling us what we can do and what we can't do. That's a freedom. That's a liberation. And the truth is that, the well-connected millionaires and billionaires like Michael Bloomberg, they're experts at taking care of themselves, and they do. But working class people are experts at taking care of each other. Working class people, we know how to pull together. And throughout this pandemic, we've shared our extra food and supplies with our neighbors and chipped in funds to take care of each other when we need it, when other people need it. So today, I'm inviting you to join me at the Working Families Party as a member. I'm a member, Steve's a member. We're asking for some more members. So if you're down to join me, to join the hottest party in town, I ask you to go right now to wfpus.org/Lexi. That's me. Again, that is wfpus.org/Lexi. Think about what a meaningful contribution, what that looks like for you today, a meaningful financial contribution. Think about what that means, what that looks like to you. And even better, think about what a meaningful financial contribution monthly is for you. What can you throw down to power our movement to face the challenges ahead of us for the long haul? Are you able to create $20, to contribute $20, $50, maybe even $100? You want to show off? Give us $100. I'm impressed. No matter what your financial contribution is, though, there is room for you in this movement to show up with all that you are and and all that you have to share. And we see you, and we appreciate you. We got you. So again, join me in building the Working Families Party of our dreams, and join by going to wfpus.org/Lexi. I want to thank you all so much for spending time with me. This has been wonderful. I hope you learned some real good stuff, and we'll see you later. Have a wonderful day.